It's the Kyle Hyman Show on Redeemer Radio.
This is Kyle Hyman, and with us is Mary Lenaburg, here to share a little bit about her daughter and how she learned to trust God during the most difficult days of her life. Thanks for being here, Mary.
Thank you so much for having me, Kyle.
Can you share a little bit about your daughter, Courtney?
I would love to. So my daughter, Courtney, started having seizures when she was 5 weeks old. When she was 7 months old, we gave her a medication thinking it would help with her seizures, and in turn, it changed our lives forever. And she had an allergic reaction to the medication. And because of that, she was a profoundly disabled child for the rest of her life. She was blind and nonverbal and wheelchair bound. Through her, though, we learned to face a lot of really hard things. When things break in your life, all the stuff that you haven't dealt with comes to the surface. And she was sort of like the divine physician, and God really spoke through her. And so I wrote a book all about it.
In what ways?
She showed us that the dignity of the human person is not in what you do, but in who God made you to be. And she showed us that when you love someone, truly love them above yourself, and you love them so much that it no longer hurts to love them. And so I think our world could use a lot more of that.
Well, and one of the things that you have said is that you wouldn't want to trade your life experiences with anyone else's, even though you know that most people wouldn't want to trade with you. So why would you not want to trade your experience of going through this tragedy and I'm sure a lot of difficult events?
Well, I say that because I think each individual life is crafted by our Creator just for us. And this has been my journey. This is what God allowed to happen in my life. So I don't think anybody would want it, because to look at my life, to care for a severely disabled child 24 hours a day, for 22 years is huge. It's overwhelming. It takes your breath away and you just want to sit down and say, nope, can't do that. Yet it was my life. And during that time, my marriage went through severe difficulty. Our son, who was perfectly able, was screaming for attention and just wanting to be seen. I turned the guilt and the shame of past sin on myself. And, when you look at all of it together, it is just the Lord speaking to me, showing me that I didn't have to do this alone, and I'm not alone. And that if I would to rely on Him, then He redeems all of it. He takes all of the good, the bad, the ugly, and the really ugly, and He makes it work to the good of His purposes. So when I say I don't think you'd want my life, I don't think you would want my life, because it was meant for me. I think you want the one that's meant for you, and that's what you should ask for.
Yeah. Can we go back to the first days or months when those initial seizures started? What was going through your head at that time?
Well, as I say in the book, her seizure started the day of her baptism. So I had waited. I'm one of 8, and I have 6 brothers. So I waited a really long time to have a girl in my arms. And I was really excited and surrounded by men most of my life. And so that first week in the hospital, not knowing if she would live or die, they thought at first she had a brain tumor. So we had to go through, and then meningitis and all of these things. And then after we gave her a medication that we thought would help her, and we signed that form. We said, yes, give this medication to her. We had to stand there and watch our daughter almost die because we were unaware she was allergic to one of the ingredients in the medication. And that was a pivotal moment, because where do you go with that? You don't necessarily blame God, because at least I didn't. I blamed myself because I did the research, I talked to the people, and yet, this happened. So I kind of was playing God at that moment. I decided I was responsible for it all, instead of going to the cross and letting Him, who died for me and my daughter on that cross, He already paid for that moment in my life, and letting Him bear that for me. And I didn't allow Him to do that. I did that myself.
How long did that go?
Wow, that went probably for the first 7 years of her life. I really, really struggled in those years, really struggled. My marriage was struggling. Our son was struggling. And I turned all of that into myself. And it really wasn't until we went to Lourdes when my daughter was 7, and we just had a moment of freedom. And God really spoke into that time in Lourdes and into a specific moment with my daughter, where it just broke us open. And we knew every life had a purpose and a value, but we knew the reason for her life, and that she knew that she was here to do a job too, and that she needed her mom and dad to get their stuff together and walk with her through this so that she could do what she was asked to do. And the one thing Courtney always did was draw people to prayer and draw people to see the human person, to see her. She couldn't speak. She couldn't draw attention to herself other than to have a grand mal seizure in the middle of a public place, which draws attention to you. Right. But she would draw people to prayer. People would come up to us in a McDonald's and say, "May I pray with your daughter?" I mean, that just doesn't happen on a typical Wednesday, but it did for us all the time. And people would ask her to pray for them. When we would go to Mass, they would come next to her and say, "Do you mind if I ask Courtney for prayer?" And I'd be like, "Ask away. She has a super highway to God, so she's your girl." She was innocent. She had no sin to block her way. So if you think about that, you're in the presence of a living saint. So why wouldn't you ask them to intercede for you on behalf of the Lord? I did pretty much every day. So, and I still do. And she's a great intercessor. But she drew people. She drew people with her smile. They wanted to know who she was, what her story was, and she made you love her without ever doing anything.
You talk about Lourdes. Sounds like that was a turning point kind of in your understanding relationship with all of this. Lourdes, obviously known for miraculous healings, especially physical healings. Not everybody has physical healings when they're there. Sometimes it's a spiritual healing. How would you describe that event and what changed in your life?
I think it was both for us. We were given a word when we stepped in the water, and that word was acceptance. And what I came to understand is the Catholic Church teaches 3 types of healing: miraculous healing, healing after a time of deep suffering, and the third one is acceptance, and acceptance that you will not be physically healed this side of heaven, that you will be healed when you enter into the gates of heaven and into the arms of the Lord. And when we were given that word, we didn't know that's what it meant then. It took us another 4 years to figure it out, to have that aha moment, but it took us 4 years to sit with it, to kind of grapple with it, and to really look at our own lives and what we were doing and what we could do differently before we kind of came to that complete spiritual healing. And I really do think that the physical healing came. We knew it would come. We just knew it wouldn't come until she took her last breath here. And God granted that for us. She died in 2014, and it was the Feast of St. John the Beloved, and he was the apostle that never suffered. And God chose that day for her to come home to him. And I just think that was just a beautiful, she was born on the Feast of St. Helen of the Cross and died at the Feast of St. John the Beloved. My child never left the cross. Wow. God wrote that story. I didn't write that story. He knew exactly what he needed her to do, and she knew it, and they made a great team. They still do.
We're talking with Mary Lenaburg. The book is Be Brave in the Scared: How I Learned to Trust God During the Most Difficult Days of My Life. What do you think is the greatest lesson that Courtney taught you?
I think the greatest lesson is twofold. First, it's the dignity of your personhood comes from God, the Creator, and not in what you can do. Our dignity is not connected to what we can do. And the second thing is love always wins. It always wins. The more you love, the greater your life is. I think God will ask us one question when we get there, and that is how you loved in my name. And I want to be able to answer that as well as I could.
So many trials and struggles that you went through, hard to go through. A lot of times it's hard to share that with somebody else, much less share it with the whole world. Why did you want to write your story down in a book?
Because Courtney told me to.
Yeah.
She was, when I was approached to write this book by Ave Maria Press, I really was hesitant. We talk about some really heavy things. We talk about anxiety, depression, addictions, really hard things. And it's not something that's typically written about, honestly, so openly, especially in the Catholic and Christian world. We tend to skate right above the surface, but not deep dive. And I knew that if I was going to do this, I was going to have to go all in. And so when I was really prayerfully considering it, I was talking to my daughter. And I remember being at the Basilica in D.C. and in the Shrine of Our Lady of Lourdes, which is where I used to take her all the time for just our place to go. And I just remember feeling a tremendous sense of peace that I needed to tell the truth and tell all of it, and that it was going to be okay. And so I did.
The situation that you went through is rare. Most people don't have to raise a severely disabled child or even have a child die before they do. Do you think the lessons are still important for people that won't have that kind of extreme suffering?
Absolutely, because the way I wrote the book, each chapter goes through something specific, like control, surrender, shame, the lies we tell ourselves. These are all things that are universal to everyone. Everybody tells themselves lies. Everybody carries past shame. Everybody wants to control the outcome of their day, the outcome of a situation in their day. So these are all general lessons. I wanted to make sure that we did sort of a universal connection at the beginning of the chapter and then tell how I did, what I did wrong and how God made it right, just to kind of help people really take a good look at where they were and how they could go a little bit deeper in their relationship with the Lord. Each chapter is written with a scripture passage at the end. There's places for you to write. There are questions that I ask you to kind of really do a self-examination. So you could use it even as a personal study, as a small group study, as a book club even. Just lots of different opportunities to use the work to really kind of see where you are with the Lord.
The title, again, is Be Brave in the Scared. I totally get the scared part. What does being brave mean to you?
Being brave means you show up and you do it even if you're scared. The absence of fear does not mean that you're not going to be brave. You got to stand in the face of that, and you have to put your foot in front of the other and know that you're not sure if it's going to shift or if it's on solid ground, but you're going to have the trust in the Lord. It's all going to be okay. And we do that every single day in our lives. There are many things that we are afraid of, but if we stand there and we just take that step and trust that the Lord is going to protect us, and He's going to bring us through whatever it is we are facing, then it's going to be okay. If He gives you the grace to get to that point, He's going to give you the strength to move through it.
And each chapter ends with some scripture. Where did those come from? How did you decide what to put in here for scripture?
Well, those are scriptures that I've prayed over the years. Most people have their Bibles marked by, the different books of the Bible. I also have sticky notes that, talk about control. When I'm feeling the need to control things, I go to specific scripture and fear and strength and all that. And so I chose from those. And then, of course, the final one is all about through trials and tribulations, you'll find strength and you're going to come to this place where the Lord has called you, because we have to understand that everything is within His plan. He allows what He allows. The suffering doesn't come from Him. That comes from something else called sin and the fact that we live in a fallen world. But He does allow things in our life. And if you really take a look, when I look back on my life, it was all to bring them to Him.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing this with us. Again, it's called Be Brave in the Scared, How I Learned to Trust God During the Most Difficult Days of My Life. It's available from Ave Maria Press, wherever you get books. And check out our website, MaryLenaburg.com. Thank you so much, Mary. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Kyle. Have a great day.